This video is going to be all about the 24 Jeep Wrangler Rubicon 392. I'm going to go over some major differences between the first generation and this one, what I like and don't like, and also what modifications I think could benefit almost any Jeep Wrangler 392. Now some quick housekeeping for our longtime viewers. This Wrangler has actually been in the family since February of this year. It belongs to my father and actually replaced his Hydro Blue 2023 392. I still have my 21 Sarge Green 392, and you'll be seeing more of that on the channel coming very soon. So let's talk about first modifications and the absolute easiest one you can do to your 392, and that's pull off the factory end caps. All Wrangler 392s come with the steel bumper group, which can easily be converted from a full width to a stubby front bumper. The advantage of doing this is you're going to increase your approach angle, which is much better off-road, and to me, I think it gives it an aggressive look without having to spend a lot of time doing any wild modifications. Now, this second modification, I will say, I believe is the most important mod you can make to any Wrangler 392, and I'll explain why. It comes from Z Automotive, and it's called the Tazer JL Mini. It is a plug-in module that goes underneath your dash into a gateway port. What it allows you to do that makes it so important, in my humble opinion, for the 392 is you can actually put the 392 in two-wheel drive. This is not available from the factory in the 3022 transfer case in the 392. This style of transfer case uses a clutch pack that basically in 4 auto is active. So whenever you're just driving really easy, not giving it a lot of gas, it's not putting a lot of power to the front wheel. So it's not too much in use. Whenever you go to stomp on the gas, however, that's when it increases the pressure on the clutch so the front wheels can pull as well. Now, the reason I think this is such an important modification is that since the Wrangler 392 has first come out until now, there have been documented issues with that clutch pack failing. It is worth noting that for 24, the Wrangler 392 did get an upgraded clutch pack. However, there has still been documented cases of people burning up these clutch packs. So in my opinion, the simplest thing to do is to put the vehicle into two-wheel drive. Z Automotive calls this force rear-wheel drive. I know I'm kind of blowing through this. It might seem like this is the first time you've ever heard about this module and stuff. I'm going to put a link right here to a video where I walk you through how to put the vehicle in two-wheel drive and pair the Tazer. Are there issues or drawbacks of putting the 392 in two-wheel drive? Absolutely. If you floor it with these 35s on the highway, it'll absolutely smoke the tires. That being said, for daily driving and being on the highway, the two-wheel drive is absolutely a benefit. I have noticed basically no advantage in fuel economy, so you're not doing it for that. The whole point of this is to preserve that clutch pack. It is worth knowing that the 3022 transfer case has the ability to go into two-wheel drive in other models. So it's not like you're doing something bad to the transfer case. If anything, you're putting a lot of load on the rear axle. For 24, it does get a full float Dana 44, still the same ring and pinion, but it is a full float axle design, basically designed to carry more weight. Despite the fact that that's really what it's intended for, it is a stronger overall assembly over the previous generations. You still have to be careful, but with a 35-inch tall tire and that full float 44, I don't think you'd ever have any issue hot rodding on the street and really driving it aggressive off-road. Again, the Tazer with the two-wheel drive feature is my main, I think, draw to it. There are plenty of other things it allows you to do. For 24, when you step out of the vehicle and you still have the key fob in your pocket, you will do the 3 honk, bump, bump, bump. You can actually delete that so it doesn't honk when you open the door anymore. You can also delete all of the traction control nannies on this vehicle, so you can completely let it loose in two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, however you want. Now for 24, all Wrangler 392s do come with a 35-inch tall tire direct from the factory, which with the 456 gears makes this thing feel very powerful and extremely balanced on road and off. We did end up swapping out the factory all-terrains for a mud terrain. However, we live in the south, and a lot of our trails, basically you're going to be battling mud at some point. The factory all-terrains just do not work well for that. This is a 35 by 1250 R17 Nitto Trail Grappler. This is, in my opinion, the absolute best tire if you are looking for something that gives you genuine off-road performance and isn't going to be obnoxiously loud on the road. I found that it's a fairly quiet tire in general compared to almost any tire, but especially for something with such large lugs and giant spacing in between the lugs. I really like how this tire drives and performs off-road. It's typically around 13 psi, which with this heavy 392 is a good balance of keeping the steering manageable with the front axle locked up. Now, before I jump into the comparisons on how this thing is between, let's essentially say, the previous gen up to now, I do want to talk about one more easy modification that if you're going to be wheeling your 392 is absolutely worth it, and that is to rotate the exhaust tips. I know it might sound like a silly thing, but I've done it on mine for quite some time, and it does change the sound just a little bit, but I will tell you, having that extra basically 2 inches of ground clearance is well worth it. The last time this thing was off-road, it actually tagged one of the tips. Thankfully, it was rotated, so it didn't do any damage. It was just under this driver's side here. It only takes a few minutes to do this, and if you're worried, oh, I'm not going to be able to get them lined up back right, they actually have essentially guides, so you can slide the tip back where it needs to be, rotate it down, and it'll be perfect just like it was from the factory. You can keep it like this. It's not going to mess anything up. It does kind of point toward this tow hook in the back. I haven't found that to be an issue. It's not like eating up the powder coat or anything like that. But if you're really going to be wheeling the Jeep, this is a simple, it's only 1 bolt per tip. Rotate it up, tighten it down, and when you're done, you can pull it back down. I do think it's well worth it, and it only takes a few minutes to accomplish this. So let's talk about some of the big changes for 24 and how they compare to some of the older model years. The biggest change for the 24 is that it now has power seats, and that's a pretty big deal for really 2 reasons. Number one, you finally have the ability to really get the seat, I think, in a more comfortable position. Used to be you'd have to kind of like jack up that side handle, and it sort of pitch the seat this way. The base would always be a little angled and your seat would be back. Just kind of a funny way to do it. I don't hate the seats in the JL and JT that's previous to this. I've always managed to make them work, but after spending 7 or 8 hours doing long days, if I'm going to be driving really long distances to go wheel, I will say it gets a little uncomfortable on the tailbone. Having spent quite a few hours in these seats, I will say I think it's the position, being able to raise the front and kind of get it a little bit more comfortable. These seats do feel more comfortable than the previous ones, and I don't think it's a padding thing. I really do think it comes down to having more position availability. That being said, something that I really don't like about these is how high they made the plastic bolstering on the side. For me, every time you get in and out, it basically pinches the back of your leg. It's super obnoxious. So if you're going to be sliding in and out, if you don't have a step to put your foot on, that is super annoying. I feel like that could have been integrated much better than what they did here. The seat, I believe, is a little bit wider. That doesn't really make a big difference for me. I do think from the 23 to 24 seat, yes, this is an absolute improvement. Is it a selling point where I would run out and get a new one just because it has power seats? Probably not. So let's talk about some of the other new interior stuff for 24. Obviously, the biggest thing being the new 12.3-inch touchscreen. You get huge nav right here, wireless CarPlay, all of that is fantastic. It's easy to use. I do like it's a little bit closer to you, so you're not kind of reaching over as far. All of this is an improvement over the 8.4, that is for sure. That being said, there are some things that I think could have been a little bit better. The forward-facing camera, you only get this much of it, so it's not like you got this huge screen. You can't have both cameras at the same time, and I think a missed opportunity is in off-road pages. It would have been awesome to have it where the camera was here, and then you have all of your off-road gauges and things like that right there, but it doesn't allow you to do that. The negatives, it definitely makes a little bit of noise. It doesn't seem like it fits in here really like I don't know, it should. They got this weird gap that's right here that you really can't put anything. Not a big fan of that. It does creak from time to time, so it just seems like this was essentially, hey, we want to put a bigger screen in here. We got this dash to work around, and we'll just make this thing come out a little bit and it'll be fine. So don't really love that. Hate how glossy this is on this side. You constantly get like this weird reflection of light from it. This would have been an awesome spot for auxiliary buttons and things like that. That's really my big complaint. Also, they still have orange gauges in here. They used to have red for the 392. It's orange. I wish they would go back. The orange just doesn't match anything in here, so it just seems like a weird thing to do. Lastly, in terms of interior stuff, if you're not aware, for 24 they did a lot in terms of sound deadening and safety improvements with like side impact airbags and things. That is a positive. Any safety feature is great. Acoustic glass, I will say, in terms of sound deadening compared to previous gen, yes, this definitely has improvements. It's noticeable. It's less noticeable when you get above 70 miles an hour. So if you're spending a lot of time on the interstate and you already have an 18 to 23 Wrangler and you're like, oh man, I want to go get a new one because it's going to be so much quieter, I think you'll be disappointed. For around town where you're not dealing and fighting with all that wind, it's better. And it's noticeably better, and it makes the cabin feel a little bit nicer, and you're not, shouting as much to your passenger. So I do think they did a good job there. My biggest gripe with the 24 model year is that Jeep still hasn't addressed the suspension shortcomings. On road, the Jeep rides and drives perfectly fine. In fact, I still stand by that the 392 does have the best riding suspension of any Rubicon right out of the gate. That being said, I do still think it should come with longer, lower control arms from the factory to increase the positive caster. If you don't plan on taking your Jeep off-road, I think you'll be perfectly happy with the 392 factory suspension. However, as soon as you get on the trail, you will quickly find the suspension lacks travel and proper compression dampening to handle the weight of the engine. With nearly 500 horsepower on tap and 75% of the 470 pound-feet of torque available just above idle, the Jeep is always ready to bite and launch, but it just doesn't have the suspension that can keep up with the power. So just like the previous versions of the 392, if you plan on putting the Jeep in the dirt, go ahead and set aside a few grand for a suspension upgrade. So yes, lots of good upgrades. Whether they're enough to sell you, I think you got to go drive the Jeep. Ultimately, I think a lot of small upgrades really made a big difference just to make this thing a little bit better. I do think the Jeep is still asleep at the wheel a little bit on the fact that these things aren't coming with 37s direct from the factory. I know there's some special like AEV packages, but the Rubicons, in my opinion, should just be on 37s. That's what you get with the Raptor Bronco. That's what this should have. The fact that this thing doesn't have Bilsteins with factory like controls for selecting your different dampening controls like you do on the TRX blows my mind. That should be standard in these things as well. So there's still a lot of room, in my humble opinion, for improvement with the Wrangler platform, but it's still incredible. The V8 is awesome. The power is just addictive. Like, you just want to give it gas all the time. The fact that it does make such strong torque numbers so low in the RPM means that even though it doesn't have that 4-to-1 low range when you're off-road, you still have plenty of power to make this thing crawl over. And with the 456 gears, it's got plenty of power. Whether you're on a 37 or a 35, that doesn't really matter. So big fan of that. The fuel economy, yeah, it's not great. In my experience, it's been 13 miles per gallon with 35s, and it's been 13 miles per gallon with 38s. I've kind of tested the gamut. Like, it doesn't really change. Off-road, fuel economy usually drops down to about 9, sometimes worse depending on how aggressive you are driving it. So that's something to consider for sure. At the end of the day, the V8's not going to be around much longer, so if you're on the fence about one of these, this is probably the time to jump on it. I will say ultimately it's a really big testament to how well this Jeep is direct from the factory. The fact that we've had it in our family for 8 months and I've only basically swapped tires and put a Tazer on it. This thing just works great out of the box. That being said, yes, we're going to be building this thing up on the channel a little bit, just kind of ready to get it just a little bit better in some of the areas that it needs it. So if you're interested in seeing what this old Earl Color 392 is going to get, be sure to subscribe to the channel. It always helps with our videos. If you have any questions, just drop them right in the comments. If you want to see some stuff I'm working on behind the scenes, you can always give me a follow on all social platforms at Ollie Mansour Editor. I appreciate you guys watching, and as always, I hope to see you on the trail. Take care.
Hey guys, thanks for stopping by the Driving Line YouTube channel. Make sure you like and subscribe before you leave. I'm Cleese McFarland. Hell yeah, brother. We'll see you later.